Welcome back to Exile Wargaming, where today, and as always, we're going to be talking about Harlequins. Now, recently, we got the new rules reveal for the Ghosts of the Webway Detachment, and this was my first game getting them on the table. And I'm going to be honest, it wasn't quite what I expected. Now, in our initial list, I wanted to build something somewhat familiar to what we've been doing up to this point. So we have a Troop Master with Chegarax Coil and another Troop Master, Bare Bones. We have a Shadow Seer with Mistweave. No longer are we in the days where Yvrain and the Vizarch are attached to a big troop brick with fights first and all the anti-infantry, dev wounds, and some extra durability. We're going to try the Shadow Seer in their place and see if this is a decent comparison. Beyond this, we have the Death Jester and a Solitaire. I love Lone Ops in this list because we have the ability to resurrect them for 1 CP and a stratagem. Allows them to just hold cheap primary in the early turns and force our opponents out. We're also bringing in 5 units of troop with fusion pistols and the new Neuro pistol glow up as well, and then that big 11-man unit of troops to attach to the Shadow Seer that will most likely infiltrate into the midboard. We have 3 Star Weavers for some of those troops to go into, and then 2 Falcons for the troops and troop masters to embark in afterwards. Get a few extra enhancements to their lethality. Being able to reroll wounds with the new troop master seems pretty nice. To round out this list, we're bringing 3 units of Skyweavers with Haywire and Zephyr Glaives. Now, it is to be determined if the Zephyr Glaives or the Star Bolus are the right call. I think it depends on how you plan on playing them. But with the new glow up at strength 6, -2, 2 damage, 4 attacks apiece, I think the Glaives are definitely worth giving a try. The 2 Vipers to round out this list are just used to maybe score some secondaries, screen out sections of the board, and just be a good piece of utility for a pretty cheap cost. We are coming in at 18 total units at 1,990 points. I wanted to leave a few points available in the end, just in case maybe we miscalculated something in the recently revealed points update. Now, our opponent today is bringing the Necrons in the Starshatter Arsenal. They have a Silent King, Imhotech to generate some extra CP, a Locust Lord with an enhancement that gives out Ignores Cover attached to a big unit of heavy destroyers with exterminators. They have 1,000,000 shots and can pretty much obliterate anything across the board. He's also bringing a Scorpec Lord with an enhancement that hands out -1 damage to vehicles in this detachment. I think this spot is normally meant for something like a Hexmark Destroyer, but our opponent was trying out the Scorpec Lord today. They have a Transcendent Catan, a unit of 5 Death Marks, 2 units of Flayed Ones, 2 units of 1 Locust Destroyers, and then 2 units of Scorpec Destroyers as well. They're coming in at 13 total units at 1,995 points. Now, my opponent and I are both practicing for a GT coming up soon, and all of the terrain layouts will be done on GW Layout 1 for this event. We're going to be running through a whole bunch of these different mission sets throughout the next coming weeks. Today, we're going to be playing Mission A, which is Take and Hold, Raise Banners, and Tipping Point. Now, this being our first game getting the Quins and the new detachment out on the table, I want to try to play as straightforward as I possibly can. My hat's off to our opponent. He was super patient, learning 6 new stratagems, all the battle focus abilities, all of the new units and their abilities and interactions. Was a little bit of a trick. Now, we did end up finishing this game in the same amount of time we would have had in a tournament setting, but it still required, I feel like, a little bit of extra patience on his part, and I just want to say thank you if you're watching. Now, we are going to deploy in our standard tried and true method of symmetry. We have a Viper up here to just score any early actions or screen sections of the board we may not want our opponent to get into, maybe contest some early objectives early on. We have 2 Star Weavers back here. We also have another unit of Sky Weavers. Essentially, what we want to do is just position these so they can get out into a good line of sight if he pokes out this Doomsday Arc afterwards. Now, we have a Falcon right here that can push out through the midboard. We can launch out our troops, which will actually get up to 13 inches of movement with the new battle focus ability coming out of this Falcon. They can jump onto this center objective from where they are right now if we really needed them to. We have a Solitaire up here in the midboard backing up our unit of troops with the Solitaire or the Shadow Seer in the midboard. They did get to infiltrate. We did deploy first, and this is exactly where we wanted them to be. We are 1.1 inches off the board, so we are not going to get charged by a bunch of Scorpec destroyers or flayed ones to begin with. And then we have the Solitaire over here. If for some reason they do or they can get to that point, we can always use Heroic Intervention. But we want this Solitaire here to gain whatever early primary or secondaries we can up here on this midfield objective. What this unit here does is kind of provide sort of a puzzle for our opponent to solve. If they do want to engage them with multiple units in the early turns, we have that reactive move to push them back. Then we have a whole bunch of extra move to clap back on them afterwards. If they want to position something in the midboard, we have Bloody Dance to be able to charge it if it's a cheap, easy unit to get rid of, and just deny any of that secondary and steal a resource in a combat activation from them afterwards. This just allows us to do quite a few things that we weren't able to do before. In the midboard over here, the Falcon was the last thing we ended up positioning, just out of line. I do not believe he would have a line of sight to get the Doomsday Arc into it from where it was based on his movement afterwards. And then we have our Death Jester over here, again, just to be a lone op to hold this objective. I don't care what he does the whole game. And then a Viper, a Starweaver, and Skyweavers here as well. The goal is to just attack these objectives in waves and continually try to deny our opponent on primary. Our opponent, on the other hand, has a little bit of symmetry. They have the unit of heavy destroyers in reserve as well as a unit of death marks. The Doomsday Arcs are positioned on each side of the board. The Transcendent Catan up here in the center. He had a unit of Scorpec destroyers right on the line, and then another unit of flayed ones just inside of cover here. The Transcendent Catan is in the center, and then a unit of flayed ones infiltrating into the midboard here afterwards. There is 2 units of just regular Locust Destroyers out here, I guess, to just do whatever actions he may need, and then the Scorpec Destroyers hanging out to hand out that -1 to wound to the Silent King. Overall, our opponent seems pretty confident they're going to be able to make something happen. We'll see where it goes in turn 1. Now, our opponent wins the turn 1 dice roll and gets to go first. They end up drawing area denial and no prisoners. Now, we talked this through a pretty good bit, and really where we were at is I don't know if there was a safe place for him to score any of these. He had an option to bring the Transcendent Catan with an advance up to this midboard here, but it would have put him in range of Bloody Dance, and we would have been able to get into combat, fight. Realistically, we probably would have taken off 5 to 7 wounds, and then in the following turn, we can fall back, shoot and charge, throw grenades, and then get it done from there. There was a very strong chance that we were able to bring down the Transcendent Catan, and he wastes that resource without it scoring secondary or primary. Either way, just a risk he wasn't willing to take. He also had an option of bringing up the Locust Destroyer up here. He did roll an advance for that, and it would have made it. But again, that Bloody Dance makes things a little bit difficult. He wouldn't have been able to score that area denial. We would have had more OC on the objective than him as well if we just engaged them afterwards. And we also have access to that additional 6-inch Consolidates or Pile In, which could have possibly got us into the flayed ones as well. And it just seemed like this very odd scenario for him of just wasting numbers of resources that he doesn't have a ton of already. So he ends up discarding both of his secondaries on turn 1. He moves the Silent King up to get into position over here and just start a sort of Death Star on this section of the board. The Transcendent Catan comes up to hold this objective with the Scorpec Destroyers and this Doomsday Arc able to repel whatever it is I may want to stack onto this objective afterwards. He ended up moving the Scorpec Destroyers down here, though, out once we kind of talked through the extra +2 inches of move from this big brick. I think his fear was I was going to come in and try to lock up a whole bunch of these units early on. So he positioned them quite a few inches away. I believe it was about 7 inches from the flayed ones that were on this section of the board. Everything else pretty much just stayed where they need to go. He didn't score any secondaries on turn 1. Now in our turn 1, we end up drawing extend battle lines and containment. So the complete opposite of our opponent. We end up launching our troops with an advance out of a Starweaver behind cover. We're just going to come up to this section of the board and essentially deny them their primary on the first turn. We throw grenades into the flayed ones, and go figure, those neuro pistols are pretty dang good. We're able to bring down all of the flayed ones essentially for free, while also denying our opponent 5 points on secondaries. Unfortunately, the fusion pistols bounced on this Transcendent Catan. We're going to bring up the empty Starweaver over here and the Viper as well, just to stage for the next turn. If he does decide to poke out this Doomsday Arc, there will not be line of sight past them unless he brings them out to a substantial mark up here. We bring the Solitaire up to the midboard. We leave the Shadow Seers unit exactly where they are, and then everything else just starts to stage forward to be able to pounce on our opponent if they do start committing resources towards the center. The Death Jester pops down over here to hold this objectives and will do containment as well. So we're getting contain over here, we're getting contain up here, and we're going to score another 5 points with our other secondary as well. We get out our unit of troops still within 6 inches of the Starweaver, so we can re-embark when we need to, just to screen this section of the board, and then our troops get out over here to screen this back section as well. The Starweavers and the Falcon, or the Skyweavers and the Falcon, are going to stay exactly where they are. The Falcon is just pushing up towards this section so we can launch our troops out wherever we need to go, possibly afterwards. Now in our opponent's turn 2, they end up drawing extend battle lines and call the Horde. They get rid of call the Horde and draw sabotage. So they are going to be able to score 8 points in secondaries this turn, but unfortunately for them, they're only going to score 5 in primary. We denied this top objective. These Harlequins with OC2 are pretty dang good now. This army feels a lot more like Drukhari than it does Eldari at this point as well. For 85 points, these units being able to punch up and just continually contest objectives seems pretty solid. Our opponent does not have a ton of OC. There are no Necron warriors or immortals or anything like that in this list, and if we can keep up this pace, we're going to be in some pretty good shape. He ends up moving the Transcendent Catan right where he was. The Silent King ends up moving up as well and dumps their shots with the Transcendent into this unit of troops. They're very easily able to bring them down, and then throws his indirect into the Solitaire, who fortunately survived on just 1 wound remaining. Down here, he did not commit any resources in trying to get the Death Jester. I feel like that would have just been a failed attempt with everything we have staged over here. If he did bring out a Doomsday Arc, he's going to be looking at 2 Bright Lances, a bunch of Pulse Lasers, the Skyweavers, our other unit of Skyweavers that's in reserve can pop out as well, and the Death Jester would be able to shoot there to begin with, on top of any of the fusion pistols over here. It just seemed like a losing proposition to take down a unit that's just going to resurrect itself afterwards. So our opponent didn't do too much, but they scored okay on their secondaries. Now in our turn 2, we end up drawing Secure No Man's Land and Storm Hostile Objective, and this really just dictated what we were going to do for the rest of the game. We have an opportunity this turn to entirely deny our opponents on any primary the following. We're going to sacrifice a bunch of units, but the points gap between us is going to be substantial. So we are going to push this unit of troops with the Solitaire out of the midboard and try to take their home field objective afterwards. We have access to that 6-inch Consolidate with that battle focus move. We can get into these flayed ones and deny a resource, and then hopefully just get onto this home field objective afterwards with a ton of OC. Up top here, we end up just moving the Starweaver in, who now has OC2, with the Viper, and we're going to contest this objective. It doesn't matter where our opponent does from this point. We denied them that turn and kind of forced them back into this section of the board so that we can continually score on these midfield objectives afterwards. Because of this, we're just going to move our troops up the Falcon and the Skyweavers. Here we're going to leave everything in the back just how it was before. We raise banners and hope that our opponent has to come out and start dictating the terms of the fight. In the charge phase, we are able to make combat with both the Scorpek destroyers and the flayed ones. We bring down the flayed ones very, very easily, but are only able to bring down 2 of the Scorpek destroyers. At the end of the turn, he ends up using a reanimation protocol and brings 1 of them back, and then we lose just a couple Harlequin troops afterwards, but we are going to control that home field objective after. In our opponent's turn 3, they end up drawing Secure No Man's Land and Containment. So he ends up moving out this destroyer up top here to contain this section of the board. The Locust heavy destroyers end up pushing towards this mid board with a good advance. The Doomsday Ark pushes out as well, and the Transcendent Catan moves up to just guarantee a charge wherever he needs to. They're able to bring down this Viper. He isn't able to bring down the Star Weaver with the Transcendent Catan, but he will be able to in the charge phase afterwards. He picks that up very, very easily. The Silent King ends up moving over here, and go figure, so many new rules. We miss the stealth, or the -1 to hit on the Skyweavers, and he is able to bring down both of these. I believe with what he rolled, we should have been able to keep one of them alive afterwards. The Silent King as well ends up putting his indirect into the Death Jester, brings him down, but we use the Resurrect strat and bring him back. We also use a reactive move on the Solitaire to bring him down behind cover as well. We are out of CP at this point. He falls back with the Scorpek destroyers over here, ends up bringing one back to full health, and then the following turn they'll be able to resurrect this other Scorpek destroyer, and then wipes out this entire unit with the Doomsday Ark afterwards. So they were able to drop both the Star Weaver, a Viper, 2 Skyweavers, and our big unit of troops on this turn, as well as the Death Jester, but he is coming back. So we took a pretty big hit this turn, and we are going to end up handing over a few points in primary, but we still should be able to walk out with a 10. Now in our turn 3, we end up drawing Recover Assets and Establish Locusts. Now we end up pitching Establish Locusts just because we need CP. It didn't matter how many points we were going to get. This detachment feels very CP hungry. We should be utilizing a lot of these stratagems to enact the battle plan we really want. I truly believe that Eldrad may be a great fit for this army. Now we have an option on this turn to do quite a few different things. We can just pile in a unit of troops onto this center field objective and contest that from our opponents, then spread out our forces on other sections of the board, or we can go after the Silent King. I really, for whatever reason it was, wanted to bring down the Silent King and just see if we could do it. So we're going to push everything we possibly can up here. We have the Skyweavers position to get in here. The unit of troops gets out of this Falcon over here and pushes up. The unit of troops that were inside of this Falcon, originally staged over here, get up and out. This Falcon moves out and over, and the unit of troops that was originally back here pushes up and re-embarks inside of there. Our unit of troops that was on this objective is going to end up getting back into this Falcon afterwards, and we're just reloading these, basically just reroll wounds factories for the rest of it, and then our Viper is going to push back over here just to screen out that big brick of Locust heavy destroyers. He ends up rapid ingressing the heavy destroyers and the Lord over here. There wasn't many places he could have put them on the board where they would have been, you know, monstrously useful, but I think this gap right here may have been a little bit better of a fit after we kind of go back and see what happened later on in the game. Now, the Silent King with -1 damage and a whole bunch of excess strats, rerolls, and a ton of CP was obnoxious to try to bring down. In the shooting phase, we were only able to bring down both of the Miniers and the Silent King 2 extra wounds afterwards. We had multiple Bright Lances going in. We had the Skyweavers shooting in. I believe they only did maybe 4 devastating wounds total. And then we had the combination of 6 fusion pistols firing into this, as well as grenades. So we were able to bring down 12 wounds total from this unit, but it definitely wasn't enough to get it close. Hopefully in the charge phase we can make something happen afterwards. In the charge phase, we end up moving both the units of Harlequin troops into combat as well as the Starweaver. He uses heroic intervention to get in these Skorpek destroyers as well. Our first unit of Harlequin troops goes absolutely bananas. We end up doing 5 impact mortals to the Silent King. And then with the rerolls from the Falcon and everything else, the Troop Master even getting -1 damage on him, they're able to put in, with the devastating wounds and a few missed saves otherwise, 10 more wounds. Add this up to the few that he lost in the shooting phase, and we are able to bring down the Silent King with nothing but damage 1 attacks. So this was pretty incredible. He does interrupt and brings down our entire other unit of Harlequin troops with the Skorpek destroyers. Those guys are pretty good with their devastating wounds as well. So we are going to lose a unit of Harlequin troops up here, but we do bring down the Silent King. We are going to have more OC on this objective, and we are going to hand our opponent a 10 on turn 4. In our opponent's turn 4, they end up scoring 10 on primary, but I believe they used a secret mission and draw overwhelming force in Storm Hostile Objective. I think they get rid of Storm Hostile Objective and end up drawing Marked for Death. So the Transcendent Catan just stays where he is. We have this Destroyer over here. The Death Marks that came down the other turn, I believe are going to end up pushing up towards this section of the board, or maybe that's turn 5. The Doomsday Ark positions down here to get some shots on whatever they may need, and then the Locust Destroyer Lord ends up pushing towards this section of the board. The Doomsday Ark is very easily able to bring down the Falcon, put some shots into the Starweaver, and then the Locust Lord brings it down afterwards. This Doomsday Ark doesn't really have any great number of shots, but is just positioning for the final turn. This unit of Skorpek destroyers ends up advancing to get towards this section of the board, and these guys stay in combat. The unit of heavy destroyers ends up pushing out. They fire into the Solitaire, and they fire into the Death Jester. The Death Jester dies. He's already resurrected. He is gone. They bring down the Solitaire, and we will resurrect him afterwards. This just feels so good for us. These 2 lone ops have scored so many points in just primary for us, even though they haven't done any bit of damage at all. So in the charge phase, the Locust Lord ends up making a 10 or 11-inch charge. He rolls boxcars into our Skyweavers and touches the Falcon. He's able to bring down 1, and then they can put, I believe, 2 wounds on him in return. This unit of Harlequin troops in the middle go absolutely ham. The Troop Master himself brings down 2 of the Skorpek destroyers. We roll a good number of 4s, and he misses all the saves, and then the rest of the troop are able to bring down the final. So in our turn 4, we end up scoring 15 again in primary and draw no prisoners and cleanse. We end up falling back with a stratagem. With this Skyweaver, we're going to cleanse the center objective. We're also going to cleanse with the Solitaire down here. We fall back with the Falcon, and then our unit of troops that was back here is going to push out and engage the Skorpek Lord. Our unit of troops that was in the center throw grenades at the Skorpek destroyers, and then we put our fusion pistols into this big unit of heavy destroyers as well, and we're able to bring down all 3 in the shooting phase. So in the charge phase, hopefully we can clean up all of this. We are utilizing the no Overwatch battle focus move at this time. In the charge phase, pretty much everything goes as planned. This unit of troops is able to bring down the Skorpek Lord. We charge the Skorpek Lord down here with the Troop Master, and then the Skorpek destroyers here as well. We're able to bring down all of them. Fortunately, the Troop Master, we really just wanted to tie him up, was able to bring him down with a few good rolls and some devastating wounds. In our opponent's turn 5, they end up drawing Cleanse and Recover assets. These Death Marks and the Destroyer up here come onto this objective. They will cleanse. I believe we're cleansing another objective where we're using Recover assets for one of these. The Transcendent Catan ends up just moving out and getting an easy charge into the Skyweaver to get some OC on this objective as well. And then this unit here ends up firing its Doomsday Cannon into the Solitaire, and then all of the other shots into these troops. They are able to bring down the troop with the other shots, but we made all of our saves on the Solitaire afterwards. So our opponent is on all of these center field objectives. I have a sneaky suspicion I know what their secret mission was. In our final turn, we ended up drawing Area Denial, which we will not be able to get at this point. We discard it and get Bring It Down, and then draw Defend Stronghold. So we are going to end up scoring 5 in total secondary points, but get a 15 on primary by the end of the game. All we need to do is get some OC on these objectives. We ended up using the unit of troops that got positioned in the Star Weaver behind this wall to move out, advance onto this objective, and we're just going to out OC them. We fire some shots in just because we can, and we bring down a couple death marks. Over here on this objective, the unit that was being protected by the Falcon just gets out and puts some OC on this. Unit of Skyweavers pops out over here. We use that stratagem to pull them off the board and bring them back, and we're just trying to bring down this for a couple extra points and bring it down. After the charge phase, we are able to finally get rid of a Doomsday Arc, but we are left without a ton of resources on the board. Now, this game ended up playing out entirely different than what I had anticipated. I originally went into this game looking for a more streamlined approach to getting into combat, consolidating and tagging units and everything else, and it turned out to be much more of a cagey and contesting sort of match. I really appreciated having that high unit count. OC2 on all of our troops, that OC2 on our Star Weavers made all the difference in the world. We didn't have to engage our opponent at every corner. We just had to make sure they couldn't score. 85 points for troops with 10 OC feels pretty good. Not having access to Fights First, Yvrain, and the Vizark is a huge nerf to our damage potential, but the Shadow Seer felt okay. Having access to that reactive move, also Bloody Dance to get us into combat if our opponents get too close and maybe steal an extra activation off the board, felt pretty good. It created an interesting puzzle for our opponent to solve in the beginning of the game, and I honestly think that just its presence alone ended up creating about a 10-point swing in points early on. The Lone Ops, for me, won this game. The Solitaire and the Death Jester didn't do much in any way to contribute to damage, but what they did do is score 20 to 30 points in primary and secondaries. Our opponent was a shooting-based army, and having essentially the Lone Ops dictate 4 different activations from our opponent meant everything in the world. They only have so many cheap units they can throw away to get rid of them. The flayed ones were not going to be able to get rid of something like the Solitaire, right? They weren't maybe going to get rid of something like the Death Jester unless they got super close, but then we may have been able to heroically intervene or whatever it is afterwards. So at some point in the game, our opponent will have to dictate something more substantial to getting rid of a single 90-point unit, and then we can pounce on it with the rest of our force. To be honest, going second seemed like a huge advantage for us in this game. Just knowing where we needed to contest at any point in time and knowing we had the bottom of the turn, we ended up putting the effort onto our opponent to make something happen in the mid game. Skyweavers honestly felt overcosted without the rerolls. I think we had one turn where I scored a 6 devastating wounds on something. Every other turn it was 2 or 3. I think the Skyweavers that did end up wounding twice was actually on the Silent King, who had -1 damage applied as well. So they didn't feel super impactful. I may go back to the Star Bolus just for the way that I use them. If this was a more combat-based army, they probably would have been incredible. I don't think this was the right stage to show off the Zephyr Glaives for them. The Vipers, though, felt great. They did everything I wanted them to do. They screened sections of the board. They contested an objective. They were super cheap and just able to be wherever I needed them to be. Just a really good resource. I think there's going to have to be a balance in this army between aggression and tricks. I think if you're trying to play overly tricky, you're going to find yourself in quite a few bad spots. But I think if you play overly aggressive, you're going to be disappointed with its damage potential. this may be a hot take, but army-wide, the damage output feels arguably less than what it did in our index detachment. But it offers a much different style of play. We are trading a reroll of a hit and a wound roll with every single unit with some different stratagems to allow us some more movement shenanigans. Ignore Overwatch. The big consolidate's a big deal. I think we have to be utilizing our OC in this detachment much more than we're utilizing our damage. If you think about it on the whole, the Skyweavers, the Void Weavers, the Falcons, D-Cannons, Fusion Pistols, all of them took a substantial nerf by not having access of rerolls to hit and rerolls to wound, as well as being able to plug in Fate Dice for big Bright Lance shots or Fusion Pistol guarantees to wound as well. I think the old detachment, army-wide, actually did more damage. It's kind of funny to see the Eldari community just assume that the troops are so much better than they ever had been. With the exception of the Troop Master, of course. He is awesome, and the Impact Mortals are incredible. I think this is much more focused around finesse, though, than brute force. If you're looking for 9th edition Harlequins, this is not them. But thanks again. I hope you enjoyed. I had a great time getting this new detachment on the board. A whole bunch of eye-opening moments had occurred. I think we are in pretty great shape moving forward, but we're going to have to adapt our battle plan and a lot of our strategies that we had been utilizing and leaning on from the past index detachment. I look forward, though, to hearing all of your comments in the comment section. Please like, share, subscribe, join the Discord. Any little bit of help means more than you can possibly imagine. But I'll see you all in the next video.